get that started. If anybody doesn't want to be on the video, just let me know and we can try to chop out parts of things or whatever. But otherwise, we'll probably post it just up on the wiki for people to review. And and so thanks for joining, everybody. The agenda for today is as follows, and we're always open to other topics if somebody has something super critical going on or just that they're really wanting to talk about. But the two things we had planned were to share some experiences, in particular from Instead's end, on trying to implement MCSD and some of the challenges that we faced on that. And I'd also welcome anybody else who's been using either CSD or MCSD or exploring using FHIR to, if you have some experiences from your end, we'd love to hear that too. Like Mark, maybe, I don't know if you all are using it with Gopher stuff or health sites. We'd love to hear about that, or even just some of your generic stuff with integrating with OSM. I think we'd love to hear some of your experiences there if you have anything you'd be willing to share. And that's obviously open to everybody on the call as well. And then secondly, we got a request from Alvin from AHIN in Asia if we had a list of like what are all the different software tools related to this idea of a facility registry. And I took a stab at starting to draft that, and I'm sure I'm missing things or I've misrepresented things or just not quite framed it quite right or have the wrong links. And so just ask, hey, if you could take a look at that and review it and add anything else in there that's missing, or even just ask a question if something's not clear. I think Alvin would really appreciate that, and then we'll share it back out to the community as sort of our working list that we can maintain over time. So, any feedback on the agenda or other things folks would want to talk about?
I'm just trying to find the document of the agenda. I can't quite see it in the invite. Are we going to the community wiki page?
Yeah, Mark, I just put the notes in the chat, and then.
Okay.
Hold on, so I'm a little bit behind today, so I'm not as organized as I always am, but I'll put the link for that tool summary document in the notes here as well.
While you're doing that, Scott, I guess I'll just have a commercial. Architecture, OpenHIE architecture community and OpenHIE in general is doing a release of the specifications of what does it mean to be an OpenHIE component, and what are the OpenHIE workflows. And there's a section in that document that your community is going to be asked to review to verify for the facility registry. So I just want to make sure you all know that, and we're expecting that review to happen in the month of May. So maybe I'll go into that document that Scott just placed for the notes and make sure I paste the document there so you're all aware of what's being published.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jennifer. That'd be great. If you could, when are you just hoping to have people's comments by the end of May, or if you could say a little bit more about the timing you're hoping for?
Well, many of the communities last year, I think, Scott, you did a presentation, but I couldn't find it when I was looking through the information. But last year, a lot of the communities did a wiki page on what does it mean to be a facility registry or a client registry. And I know, Scott, you did a presentation that came from this group, but I haven't been able to find that. So I basically took whatever I could find for each of the communities. In most cases, it was a wiki page, and put it into that specification. Also, it includes the workflows that we've been working on all along. So I'll put it in there and you guys can peruse it. So in general, most of the communities, the content just needs to be reviewed and approved. For your community, I think we need to actually find that content where you documented the requirements.
Okay, cool. I may have given a presentation. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I knew we do have a list of what we call kind of user stories that we've curated over the years. So we definitely have that. And that sounds great. I think this community would be happy to give a review of that and see how we can help inform it. But yes, you're hoping to get comments from people on those points of like, hey, what is a facility registry? What are the workflows by the end of the month? Is that right?
Yeah, we'll be wanting to publish and send out specifications that implementers can use. We'll be wanting to do that before the community meeting, which will happen in the fall, which hasn't been announced yet, but announcement should be coming soon.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Jennifer. Yeah, if you could toss some links in the notes doc that I left in the chat here in Zoom, that'd be super helpful. So, yeah, and the link for the list of facility registry tools is in there as well. Yeah, please, if you have a second, just glance through that and review it, and maybe if we have some time today, we can even talk through it a little bit. Well, awesome. So, well, why don't we jump into our first agenda item, and that's to just share some experiences around implementing CSD or MCSD, or even aspects of FHIR around integrating a facility registry or a geospatial data source with other systems. And from our team, we have Nico, who is our director of platform at Instead and heads up much of our software development and technical work. And he has a little bit that he was going to share just about CSD and our experiences on that front. And would love to answer anybody's questions as well, if anybody's curious to ask questions as too. And then, yeah, maybe just before we jump into that, I was curious, does anybody else have some experiences they would be open to sharing just about challenges or how easy it is to integrate systems, just specifically around geospatial data and facility registries? Maybe I'll just pause there to see if anybody is keen to share on that, or if maybe we'll just focus on sort of the experience of Resource Map for now. All right, cool. Well, hey, how about we'll start with the sort of Resource Map conversation. We'll see where it goes from there. So, well, hey, Nico, can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, I can hear. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you well.
Cool. All right. Yeah.
Well,
all right. So I think the first point here is we've done the CSD integration several years ago. So the experience I have is from some time ago. We've reviewed MCSD recently in the last few months. I've noticed, and I've also confirmed with people that the structure of the data model itself is the same. It's mostly the format and the representation will change. So I think that many of our challenges still apply. The main sort of challenge that we've had was that Resource Map was conceived as a flat data model. It doesn't have any sort of hierarchical organization in terms of the data per facility. It handles hierarchies in terms of like administrative organizations and dependencies in a tree, but the data itself for a facility does not contain nested levels of collections, right? Mostly because Resource Map is a sort of like an agnostic geographical database in a way, right? So it could be used for many other things other than just facilities. And for that reason, representing in CSD things like starting from simple things as contacts and addresses was a real challenge, because we had to figure out ways of expressing the mapping between a flat structure and the hierarchical structure that CSD requires using metadata, right? We had to enable somebody that was defining fields for a collection to express the fact that, all right, this field is a CSD address and it's a child of this other entity, and the code for that address is this, and the component is the street address or the province or the country or the postal code. The same thing happens with contacts and contact points and facility operating hours and stuff like that. And where it gets really complicated to do that mapping is with things like services and providers and that kind of nested entities, which resource map wasn't conceived to handle in the very beginning. We did all of that by creating sort of like a domain-specific language through the metadata, right? So when you configure the layers and the fields in resource map, there's a set of values that you can use to express how the map needs to be done. We had to write a little manual on how to use that, but it's extremely complicated to do the mapping. You need a ton of different fields that are flat in a way, right? So if you want to support, like, I don't know, 5 different contact addresses, and each of the contact addresses has like 5 different components, you'll need like 25 different fields in resource map in order to be able to express that. So I think that's the key challenge that we've had. The fact that there's no easy way to just say, well, this is the only stuff that I can handle in the system, and be able to just export that in CSD without having to support additional nested entities in a way.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Nico. That's awesome. And so just to add a bit, like, from our end, I think we've often had groups using resource map for facility registry, and they're seeking to integrate it with something else. And we're often sort of stuck with this hard conversation with them of like, well, hey, what does OpenHIE support in terms of workflows and data sharing? And like, what's the quickest, easiest, most sustainable path for them to actually do that integration? And oftentimes it's been to just use the like RESTful native APIs that Resource Map already has, as opposed to trying to start changing the defined fields in their collection and affecting their curation approaches, and in addition to that, making a pretty messy data specification just to support a particular standard. But yeah, maybe we'll pause here. I'd be curious if anybody has any questions, just from like, hey, have you thought about this, or other feedback you all might have for us on that, or questions you might have. Cool. Well, maybe I'll frame the question slightly differently. Is anybody else using the workflows or MCSD standards and integrations with their tools? Like, Mark, are you guys using it either in Gopher stuff or with health sites at all?
We've done a fire specification for Gopher, and Richard is probably better placed to speak to that, given that he's working on the technology with Luke. Richard, are you able to do that?
Sure, absolutely. So the facility reconciliation tool uses MCSD. So MCSD is actually pretty broad. It's meant to cover facility registry as well as a health worker registry, and which means that it can include information about organizations managing locations. It can include information about healthcare services being offered at locations, and it has information about practitioners and their roles as it relates as well to healthcare services. So it really kind of covers the whole thing. So that's just one little footnote. And Gopher itself, of course, is using the FHIR resources in the back end. Any data source is converted to FHIR, and then it uses a FHIR server in the back end as well. So ideally, what would happen is that if someone were implementing the facility reconciliation tool, they could sub out any FHIR server they wanted, right? We don't build our own FHIR server. We use Gemby's Hearth FHIR server, but we could use any other institution's FHIR server, or even the primary reference one that's regularly updated, called HAPI, H-A-P-I, the HAPI FHIR server. And we're adding support into HAPI to more directly support MCSD, because MCSD also, in addition to being kind of flexible around supporting health worker registries, facility registry, it also supports transactions. So this can be simple things like when you do an HTTP GET request and you limit things to updates since a certain time frame, and it can also handle a couple of other things. So that's just kind of a brief view of Gopher and MCSD, and is that helpful?
I think so. Yeah, Richard, just curious, do you all implement the whole MCSD standard, or do you just do part of it? Or just curious.
Yes. Well, it's quite flexible, right? So if you're making a facility registry, you don't necessarily need all the other stuff, right? And if you need a health worker registry, you would still have most of that, because a health worker registry, of course, is going to include the facility information. It may not have healthcare service information, but it would have practitioner, role, location, or organization. So it really depends on your implementation. And MCSD is pretty flexible like that. So does that help?
No, I think so. Yeah. And I guess this one last clarifying question, like, and that most of these projects you're working on they're related to like DHIS2 and IRIS and Gopher, right? So is that right?
That's right. Something really interesting related to this as well. And again, I don't want to take us too far away from where you're going with this stuff, but the way that DHIS2 approached this, I'm no representative of the DHIS2 community, but the way that they approached it is that they wanted to add FHIR APIs, and they wanted to add, which includes MCSD. They wanted to add FHIR APIs, and they wanted to do so in a way that still maintains the database structure of DHIS2 in a sense. So they actually have a separate application called the DHIS2 FHIR adapter. So what this enables you to do is to pull the organizational unit hierarchy out of DHIS2, but through this intermediary, through this DHIS2 FHIR adapter. And you can also push data in. So for example, let's say you're using OpenMRS, and it has a FHIR API, of course, but if you're using OpenMRS, you can push FHIR resources from OpenMRS into the DHIS2 FHIR adapter, and the DHIS2 FHIR adapter will store those properly itself, because the DHIS2 FHIR adapter actually has a FHIR server. It uses the Happy FHIR server in its backend. And it can update DHIS2 tracker, right? So you can update tracker, I forgot what the terminology is for DHIS2, tracker capture and tracker events or whatever, in DHIS2, but using a FHIR API. And I think this is quite common in industry, in private, in health IT generally, globally, not just in low and middle income countries, but globally, that you're not going to see internal APIs for major health IT tools change overnight. The majority of health IT data exchange traffic is still done in HL7 v2. But what you are seeing is the addition of a FHIR API wrapped around those systems. That's, at least in my anecdotal experience, that's starting to be really common. So Epic and Cerner and G Healthcare, et cetera, I mean, they're all using FHIR APIs now. But that doesn't mean that they change their entire internal structure of their software, which could be on site for a decade or something. They're not changing all that. But the point is that what's common is that you have an API interface. So that way you have the power of tools like DHIS2 or Resource Mapper or whatever, but you have that additional helpful API layer.
Mm-hmm. I think, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think the main difference is that we don't have fields that can be pre-mapped to entities in CSD, right? The only native fields that a collection in resource map comes from are the location and the name of the facility and an ID, right? So anything else that you define for resource map is just another field, right? You can specify the type and how to organize it, etc. But there's nothing that resource map knows about a specific field other than the type and the name that you gave it to. So every single time you create a new collection, you need to manually do the mapping to CSD, because there's no way we can automatically do that beforehand, right? With a domain specific tool where you can create like new collections or new sets of data, but the fields are already defined for you because you already know what the entity that you're handling is. You could have that mapping done manually without changing your internal data structure, but you could have a programmed internal mapping in your data model and CSD data model, and just allow anybody to use that without having to set it up manually by specifying weird metadata. So I totally get that this is not a CSD problem. It's a mismatch between the way that resource map is structured to provide any sort of flexibility for anybody, and CSD specific purpose to represent this type of data in a hierarchical way.
Don't you think we could create some type of map where you put in what your resource map field is, and then it automatically relates to specific FHIR fields that we need? I don't know. That's just kind of what I was thinking.
That is something like what's done right now. I mean, you create a field in resource map, and then you say, well, this field is the second component of an address entity here or there. But the resource map doesn't even have the ability to handle multiple number of entities underneath a facility, right? So if you want to handle 5 contacts in a facility, you need to create 5 sets of fields and name it like, I don't know, contact 1 name, contact 1 last name, contact 2 first name, contact 2 last name, and then do all that mapping to CSD. So it's really not easy to do, not comfortable to do for anybody.
One question we had from the past was like, is there sort of a subset of complying with the standard that is like the basis of what's really needed at the end of the day? You know, like, well, just the name, the location, and a set of fields that describe services, if you will.
Yeah, there is an MCSD. Yeah, it's in the specification. It's in the profile itself. The profile is also being updated. So one use case that's become interesting is that, and I have to actually look at a note a bit here, is that you can have locations that are managed by organizations, and one organization, of course, can manage multiple organizations. One organization can manage multiple locations. But the idea would be to be able to handle more complex organizational hierarchies where a location is managed by multiple organizations or part of multiple organizations. So I'll probably mangle this, but consider a situation in which you have a hospital that, often in hospitals you'll have clinics run by NGOs, but there's still some administrative organization managing that clinic. That is part of the public health system. So it gets really interesting, those kind of situations where you have a specialty clinic inside for example, inside a hospital, and that's probably not the clearest example, but those kind of complications are now being handled, and there's an extension going into MCSD to be able to handle all that kind of stuff. And unfortunately, Luke is unable to be on the call today. Luke Duncan, our Assistant Director of Health, because he's actually at one of the global standards meetings, at one of the IHE meetings, working on exactly this and some other standards. So we'll make sure to invite Luke back and make sure to keep this community involved in that consultative process, so you know how to participate and also be updated on how and in what way MCSD is further extended.
Nice. Yeah, Richard, can you say a little bit more about where that update is in the process, and sort of, and I don't know if you could share like which implementations are sort of driving the the requirements for how that works as well. I think the community would be interested to hear that.
Unfortunately, I don't know very much about it because this is really solidly being handled by Luke in this excruciating consultative process they have at IHE.
Yeah, I know.
Let's bring Luke back for the autopsy. Yeah.
That sounds good. Yeah, no, we can relate to IHE being a long and very time intensive process to engage with, and I think that leads to like a little bit of the challenge here with like deciding what workflows or standards are sort of baked into OpenHIE, right? Is that a lot of times where we need to integrate things, we don't have budget to inform the creation of standards and like the or even like the feedback loops in a timely way, right? Because there's like these long cycles. You need somebody dedicating quite a bit of time to managing and shepherding and reviewing the profiles and standards. And I think that doesn't play well to projects that are often on a shoestring budget, seeking to integrate two systems and getting those kind of like inputs and feedbacks from implementers and groups working in countries directly. It makes it really hard. So but yeah, if there's ways that we can help give feedback to that, I think it'd be great. And I think something that would be helpful for the community is to better understand like, hey, what's like the most basic, simplest version of this that's possible? Is it just the ID, the name of the site, and the GPS locations, and like, is that considered checking enough boxes that it's could use MCSD, or is it going to break it along the way because MCSD is expecting A, B, and C other thing as it goes? And I don't think we have a really clear answer of, hey, like where is that line, and what would be the most simplest basic thing to do, and then can we also test that against real projects that are seeking to, at least from our perspective, seeking to implement resource map with other systems as well. We'd love to understand that better.
I'm wondering if, Richard, maybe after Luke gets done with this round of meetings, if it'd be helpful for some of us just to have kind of like a session that's focused on here, understanding what are the base MCSD requirements, what can resource map do, and what are some of the use cases that countries are specifically needing. Wonder if we could just have a little conversation about those three different things and come together with an approach.
Sure, that's a great idea. Thanks, Jennifer.
Nice. Well, hey, I don't know if there's any other comments or questions around CSD. But Mark, I don't know if you'd be interested to just share an update on how the integration with OpenStreetMaps is going and how you guys are thinking about that. This is a selfish question just because I'm curious about it. I don't know if you'd be willing to give us a quick update.
Yeah. So I've just been to Senegal and have been meeting with a lot of the stakeholders in Senegal in the health cluster and just explaining the methodology that we're developing and just presenting the data lifecycle and trying to explain the value of sharing the data and the cost saving that comes as a result of that. So, I mean, I've been focused more on that side of things, and Tim Sutton and Doug Moran from eHealth Africa and Cartosa have been doing the coding, and we've got a good staging instance in place, and together with the Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team, we're finalizing an attribute list of OSM supported tags, and trying to, one of the interesting ones that we're looking at the moment is looking at the sort of the levels for health administrative zones, And so, our MSF colleagues are asking for that, and we're trying to find an attribute that could potentially support that. And it seems to be the is in tag, but it's not finalized yet. So that's sort of halfway through that process, and about to publish a wiki page. And then we've got sort of a health sites fire support implementation plan with sort of 3 or 4 phases, which I think, well, Richard and Luke are across. And we're basically in the throes of implementing this integration, but I can't really speak much deeper than that at the moment, Scott.
No problem. Yeah. No, I was just curious how it's going, and so your intent is to still have sort of OSM be the an open global data store for the sites that come in through health sites. Is that right, or how are you guys what's the higher level goal? Is that still where you're heading?
It is. And in fact, what I can do is maybe I can do a screen share, and I can just walk you through that. So I'm just going to bring up the diagram here. Okay, so just working out how to do this. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yep, I can see it well.
Okay, so are you looking at a slide deck?
Yeah, it says path health sites at the top there. Yeah.
There we go. Okay, great. So you should see the full diagram now. So just to explain this to everyone on the call, this is the health sites website platform, and the way we're building this now is to use OpenStreetMap as the data store. So when somebody logs onto health sites and changes an attribute, we save it directly to OpenStreetMap. This then gets synced with a technology that Cartoza is developing that pulls updates from OpenStreetMap every 2 minutes, and then publishes those updates to the health sites database and API, and allows us to then pull in lists of CSV lists of health facilities, and we can make a freedom of information request to ministries of health or organizations with data to share, and then pull that list in and generate a report for them, depending on whether or not there's been a duplication. So in the case of the Ministry of Health, they get to basically share their list into OpenStreetMap. And any duplications get reported to them, and they can then begin to sort of harness the updates of the crowd, and we achieve this interoperability. So this is really the big win that we're trying to achieve with OpenStreetMap. It's the interoperability of health facility data through OpenStreetMap. And our fire support will one day enable that link to be sort of integrated with the DHIS2 instance of the ministry, so that they could share their list with OpenStreetMap, and pull updates, and look at updates from OpenStreetMap to inform their list. So then we move forward to Gopher and eHealth Africa through their Ether middleware is helping us to publish this part. So Richard, this is your part, and maybe you can pick it up for a moment there again. Hello?
Hi, sorry about that. I had to step away I was trying to find the MCSD profile to paste into the notes. So I missed
Okay.
what my mark was. What's my mark? Tell me
Yeah,
what
so I'm just coming into your part of our diagram where we're publishing to Gopher through the Ether middleware. And so an HDX with the hexel tag is the next part that I was going to get onto. And then finally our ODK form is going to allow us to give people in the field the opportunity to update attribute information on health facilities directly into OpenStreetMap. So yeah, Richard, I was just going to suggest that you give us a few lines describing the integration for your part.
Sure, thanks. So behind the scenes, what's really happening, and I guess it's kind of similar with the DHIS2 fire adapters. What Gopher does is that Gopher is a Node.js app, and it's a front end. It's also got a back end portion of all the business logic, but it talks to a fire server. So it's talking to the Jimmy Hearth fire server. So what that means is that there's an existing API. So you could open up access to that and have the ability to pull from or push to information in Gopher using that fire server itself. So we don't have to expose an entirely new, different, or replicate an API. We can simply use that Gopher API. So the consultation process that Mark has been helpfully shepherding with all those involved in the Gopher tool is around adding that fire API on the Gopher side, on the health site side. This health sites is amazing, and it's a super powerful tool, and it's really oriented towards ordinary folks to be able to just go in and really powerfully be able to look at and manipulate and obtain facility information. And we're not trying to replicate that. We are the Gopher tool, not we, but the Gopher tool is a very, very narrow use case around reconciliation, and that those utilities can expand, but it's still not meant as that larger entry point. So is that helpful, Mark?
Absolutely. Thank you, Richard. So from my side, I'm looking to understand the JMB host fire server better and deepen my knowledge on the capacity and the services that it provides. And my understanding is that JMB as an organization has got a lot to offer us. Yeah, I'm trying to work closer with them, and because I think what's going to happen once we've established this level of technology is that we're going to start being able to focus on other things. Now that what we're hoping is going to happen is that we're going to reduce the cost of maintaining the list, and that cost saving is then going to be able to be focused on employing more doctors or focusing more on services for social entrepreneurs, or moving the cost, let's say, the cost list up a level, so that things that in the past weren't affordable suddenly are, because we've been able to harness the updates from OpenStreetMap and the fantastic resource that it is. So thank you, Scott. Thanks and Richard. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Mark, thanks for sharing all that. We really appreciate it. And and maybe in a future call, we'd love to give you the floor to, present more on how progress is coming or any challenges you're facing. And also if you have, feedback into the standards and ways geospatial data is shared, we'd love to incorporate that into the different workflows that OpenHIE supports and helps spread. So,
thank you, Scott. Yeah, I mean, from my side, I would just put an invitation out there to everyone on the call just to jump in and make suggestions, because they're not immediately obvious to me, so we've kind of trying to do this open development approach where we want to focus in on one specific thing and do it really well, and do it for everyone else, so that you guys can take the benefit of it and use your skills in other areas and not have to worry about this part. Yeah, open invitation to everybody in the call. I'm going to now try and stop sharing my screen.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Mark. Thanks. Well, great. Anybody have any questions for Mark or things that you want to share with them before we move on to the next topic? All right, cool. Mark, thanks. I was going to say, I still see your screen. Just wanted to let you know. Well, great. So we have 15 minutes left, and unless there's sort of a burning topic somebody would like to discuss, perhaps we could just take a quick look at that list of facility registry tools. I'd love to send it back to Alvin and just share over the community group a bit more broadly, and it'd be awesome to take a few minutes to review that. And I was wondering, was everybody able to see the link in the notes? It's sort of the second topic in the notes. There's a Google Doc there. And I started to list out sort of different categories of things. And if I miscategorize something or you guys don't like how it's sort of lumped, I'm totally open to organizing it some other way. But I sort of had there's like these, data sources that we consider facility registries. These are sort of like the core of what this community is about. And then there's things that help make that data more usable and accessible, right? And so there's like these, I lumped them as like integration or interoperability tools, things like Gopher and the Infoman and the like. We've also done some work around portals, hey, how do you make this data publicly accessible and viewable? Mark, I tossed health sites up in the registries realm. I know there's often crossover between these things, but we have Instead has a specific thing just for presenting it out publicly that's separate from the registry. So I toss that as a separate part there. And then, hey, how do you keep data current and curated over time? And then, we have different specifications, and I was going to toss some links for project examples too. But maybe we'll just pause there. Do you guys like how this is organized? Anything you'd want to see different? Any glaring things I'm missing here or that you would want to add? Yeah, we'd love your feedback before we share it back out.
What I would love is to see a more visual representation of these technologies, and but I think you have laid it out really well. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, maybe we could do 1 minute or 2 minutes YouTube overviews of technologies and try and link them in there.
Yeah, Mark, I think it'd be awesome. Obviously it would probably require whoever's sort of the lead person on whatever that thing is to just talk about it quickly or do a little screen share or something.
Yeah.
But I think that'd be great. Or, some groups might already have some basic things together we could just reuse, which is, often preferable in our busy schedules. But yeah, I think it'd be great. I love that piece of feedback. We could definitely start to build that out. Yeah, anybody else? Jennifer, Richard, or Eileen, anything you think's missing here?
I think this is great. And I think as I was mentioning about OpenHIE wanting to publish some specifications, I think it's a great opportunity for all the owners of those tools to look at the OpenHIE specifications and make sure that we're representing a facility registry generically and fairly.
Jennifer, I'm curious to see that specification, and I'm also wondering whether you've had a chance to see how Health Sites measures up against it.
So our first step is to document what we think all the open HIE components are. And then after that, we will be working on how do we tell if something is open HIE compliant or not. So I think it's actually up to this group to help us figure out what compliance means. When you look in the at the link that I put in the notes page, you'll see that most of the other communities have specific requirements that they expect a client registry or an interoperability layer or shared health record to do. So they're listing out functionality that they think those tools should support, which is what I think this group did last year, but we didn't put them on the wiki, so I couldn't find them. But I think as we are thinking through those things, this is our opportunity to begin building best practices and have those published.
Okay. I'm looking on the notes page and I'm just trying to see your link. Is it in the May 2 section?
Yeah, it's in the section under the last question. Let me go back to that page and tell you. Sorry, I got too many. Okay, so I'm highlighting it. Where'd it go? Okay. Yeah, so I'll highlight it and make it bright colored. Oh yeah, Scott's on it right now.
Okay, got it.
It's red now.
Thank you.
Cool. Jennifer, I think it probably makes sense. Like we'll do a little bit of, at least from Instead's end, we can do a little bit of homework to look at. We had this list of user stories, and I'll try to dig up if we did a presentation too. My memory is failing me on that one, but
I think we put things in there like recommended that it shows a map and recommended that it supports hierarchies and things like that. But I just don't know what happened to that. It was either in Google Slides or in PowerPoint where we did that last year.
Oh yeah, that does sound familiar. I think I might have it here actually. Let me just see if this looks right. Yeah, I think it's this one. I'll share the link here. I'll put it in the notes doc here too. So PPT from 2018. I have such a strong memory of this slide deck that I'm sure it's like 100% amazing quality, but I think we should probably take it with a grain of sand because I have no idea what's actually in there. But I think we spent some time last year working on this, as I recall. So hopefully it's helpful to everybody. Well, great. So, well, Jen, like we'll take a look at the specification doc and to see how it maps to that presentation from last year, and I'll also link the user stories that we've been curating over time too. And yeah, we're going to see how it, if there's any things missing or any things that we should discuss in the future, just to get you that feedback you need to move that document along.
And I think your document that lists all these different tools and things, we need to consider all that scope when we're thinking about what would countries need and what we want to highlight. This is something that we're planning to do each year, and so it can evolve over time. But I think as we're starting to carve out and have different facility registries, I think having like a common set of what does a facility registry mean and what are the features that we'd be expecting would be helpful to all of us as we move forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I think the more inputs from different types of facility registries, the stronger it'll make the, whatever standards or workflows OpenHIE is supporting. And, maybe another dimension for us to consider is like there's a non-insignificant number of sort of like country developed, like homebrew registries almost, right? It's, there's some, like an individual developer who sort of hacks something together and they get a website up and they start calling it their facility registry, and it is one, right? But, it's oftentimes not like, based off of, one of these open source tools. And it might be interesting to include some of their insights too, of like, hey, how could we make it easy for anybody using DHIS2, resource map, health sites, and, some of these, kind of like custom developed things to all use the same way of sharing data. And if we can find something that converges around all those things, then I think we've succeeded in making an easy to use standard that, is as simple as possible. So.
Scott, on that point, I think something that would really drive that tech need is our compelling user stories, and almost like social entrepreneurial user stories. So people have data to share, but I don't know always whether the user experience and the software has evolved sufficiently to enable, let's say, transactions or actions to have that actions that can be developed, which means that people use the data to sustain themselves because it's worth something to them. So rather than selling a CSV list of data, they share it with everybody because that sharing activity actually benefits them in a way which they prefer, let's say. I mean, it's quite vague for me still because I'm still trying to do this myself. But my sense is that having a simple user story that everyone in the world will be able to understand, that runs off the back of the data you're asking for, and pulls the data and the technology together would be really useful. And that's the health science approach at the moment. And, we're part of the Digital Health and Interoperability Working Group, and we're focused on public-private participation within that working group, and then also Peter Benjamin's digital health apps and standards for those apps. And so, we're looking for user stories really that these apps can consolidate and support. And so, off the top of my head, for instance, one user story could be, I want to receive updates from ministries of health who are asking for transportation facilities for pregnant women so they can get to the clinic. Someone has registered themselves as being pregnant and they are in an outlying village and they need to get to a particular clinic. We're prepared to pay for a taxi ride if you can support that need. So that's a really kind of loose user story, I acknowledge, but my point is that I think by putting it into these sort of human terms, and using and championing, kind of establishing the human-centered design around the persona, we can pull the technology together like you're asking for.
Mm-hmm. Oh, Mark, yeah, 100% I agree. I mean, I think you're talking about like, what's the value proposition of a facility registry and why people should share data.
Yeah.
And I think we have some documentation on that already. I'll try to dig it up, but like, I think from our perspective, the ones that have driven the most so far is around monitoring and evaluation reporting, and making that more accessible. But I think that's just scratching the surface, and it oftentimes isn't really getting at social impact. It's just more about, hey, can we monitor what's happening? And
right.
I think I think what you're saying is like, well, hey, let's be really clear about the value propositions that can lead to direct impact of like why this is important. And from our end, the things that we found to be most compelling are that you can do referrals, right? It's easy to figure out where to send a patient because you can know what facilities offer what kinds of services. The second is around open data. You can, and I think health sites is core, that this is your wheelhouse, right? Hey, we want to make it easy for anybody to see this data So we stopped replicating it, and you can, spur on a whole ecosystem of people using it. And that's, I think, fantastic. And then the other ones that we've seen are around planning. And that's a lot of why Instead's been working on PlanWise, is we want to make optimizing and growing networks of sites as easy as possible. And that can, certainly has like an impact perspective, getting the right services where it's most needed and that kind of thing.
Yep.
But yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of others. And, like I think the malaria folks would speak from like a sort of community health worker implementation standpoint. And a bit of it's specific on what a program or what problem you're trying to solve. But I agree. I think we should always ground ourselves there. And then we should sort of build up to what's the right way to share data from those scenarios, as opposed to implementing a standard and then saying, okay, great, now what can we do? Right? Like it's a bit backwards that way. So I'm 100% with you on that. And I think we should always kind of take that mindset.
And you know what I'm looking for more contact is maybe working with PEPFAR and the Dreams project, because they understand the user needs and the use cases. And so part of me thinks that, the human-centered design initiative focused on these user stories and which are the most kind of sought after or prioritized user stories, and then using those to drive our work. And then I think, like you've mentioned, the referrals and the planning are right there. I'm sure we'll be right there. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Well, hey guys, first of all, thanks for the conversation today and everybody's time. Any last thoughts or topics for a future call, or any other feedback or points anybody would want to share before we wrap up? All right, cool. Well, let's wrap up for today then. And yeah, thanks everybody for joining. And I'll post this video online, so if you want to share with anybody who wasn't able to join, we can do that. And yeah, otherwise, I hope you all have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks, everybody. Ciao.
Thanks, everyone.